tools. So then it's not just about protecting the data anymore, but then being able to make sure that the tools which can be used against us, we have a way to protect ourselves from these tools as well. Okay. So the outline of my presentation, I'm going to look at an overview, the initiatives we've implemented in GCA, planned initiatives, challenges, and conclusion. Now, within GCA, we've looked at having a member on the cybersecurity panel in ICAO. And the cybersecurity panel is a working group or a study group which looks at cybersecurity and advances the policies on cybersecurity within the aviation ecosystem. Now, on that work group, we have Mr. Benjamin Eshen, who is also a director of ICT in GCA. And then at the state level, we have the Cybersecurity Act. The Cybersecurity Act is an enabling intervention by the state. And it's from the Cybersecurity Act, we have the Cybersecurity Authority, which is the CSA, coming out of it. Now, the CSA has also developed a CII directive, and the CII directive is a Critical Information Infrastructure Directive, which gives the legal basis for the implementation of relevant measures for the protection of our CIIs. Now, it also establishes a baseline for cybersecurity requirements for all designated CII owners. And the CII owners are various organizations and departments within the country, and the transport department, which aviation falls under, is also part of it. Now, at the authority level, we have the CII owner registration. The registration means that you register to be a CII owner, and then you have to identify the various critical infrastructure that fall under you. Once you identify this critical information infrastructure, you also make sure that you provide the necessary information for the cybersecurity authority to be able to understand the systems that you work with and you govern. Now, we also have the regulatory oversight, which is we have from the Annex 17, and then our GCAT Part 17, and then the NCAS CSP. At the ANSP level, we have a cybersecurity team, which I'm a part of, and the cybersecurity champions. Now, the champions also form the team, and we have various people who are looking at various things within the authority. We also have at the administrative level, a cybersecurity policy developed by the cybersecurity team, and a manual which is based on the ISO 27001 framework. And then we have awareness. Awareness is necessary. Before we left Ghana, we had kickstarted our awareness campaign, which is running throughout. It's not going to be something we run and stop. No, we'll keep on doing it and keep on doing it. And then at the technical level, we have a secure network design identified and protecting our critical systems and data, and then a risk assessment of our critical information infrastructure. We have training and certification of our team members as well. This training has been in basic cybersecurity, aviation cybersecurity, advanced cybersecurity and forensics, security blue topics. Security blue means that you are training your people how to defend your systems. And with that, we have threat intelligence, modeling and management, network analysis. Splunk is a tool we use for monitoring, and then Azure Sentinel, which is a protection device within the Azure framework. Now we have a cybersecurity risk assessment of our CNS ATM equipment as well. And then we prepared and participated in the ICAO USAP audit, specifically within the cybersecurity area. Now the cybersecurity team, once formed, had to come up with our terms of reference to govern what we do. And then we went ahead to train and certify our members. And then we did some risk assessment of our systems, and then developed our cybersecurity manual, and then prepared in the ICAO USAP audit. Now, what are some of our planned initiatives? In 2024, we are continuously training our people, and we are doing awareness on cybersecurity as well. And then we've kickstarted a monthly and quarterly reporting on threats and mitigations. The reason we are doing this is threats keep on evolving, new tools keep on coming up, and we want to make sure that we have a report to track these things. Now, we are conducting cybersecurity audits as well. We want to look at things like access control and then disaster recovery. And then we want to also establish a stakeholder engagement within the aviation ecosystem. We are looking at various stakeholders coming together, sharing information, learning from each other. And that is what we want to do. And then establishment of our first security operations center. Now in 2025 and beyond, we want to still continue training and providing awareness on cybersecurity, go deeper into threat intelligence, sharing and collaboration, and then have continuous risk assessment and penetration tests. Now, with the penetration test, we need to be very, very clever about it because we have systems which are being used and we don't want to bring down these systems. So this is an area where we actually have a challenge, but we are still working on finding a way to do it. Now, we want to continue with our reporting on threat and mitigations, and then an enhancement of our disaster recovery plans, conduct more audits on cybersecurity, and then establish our second security operations center. Now, the first security operations center is basically going to look at a lot of what we do within the administration. Now, over there, we have data which is at rest and data which is moving. But the second operations center, we want to look at the ANSP and the various systems within the ANSP. We have systems, CNS systems, which are different from systems being used in the administrative body. So we want to make sure that we have a SOC which looks at that area as well. Now, the training and awareness is really key and important for us because we want to make sure that we foster that culture of cybersecurity within the authority. Because you see, there are situations where you have people really wanting to show that, oh yes, I work in aviation, but that makes you a target. Because once that makes you a target, when we do things like the threat analysis and trying to profile a person to say, okay, this person can be a target for me. Now, mind you, I say these things because I have training in being able to profile a person and know how to get to that person. So if you are working within a certain industry and a very sensitive industry, you need to know that you are a target when it comes to cybersecurity. Now, historically, some of the aviation systems are not connected to the internet. Some are not connected to the internet. So it means that I'll not be able to probably go through the internet to get to your systems. But then we have found ways to make sure that we can get to your systems, even though it's not connected to the internet. And in some other presentations I've done, I've presented some of these tools and how we can use them to connect to you. But it's an attack vector. It's a process that people follow to find a way to get to you. So we want to do awareness. We want to continue with our awareness and make sure that people understand that where they work is sensitive and they need to protect themselves as well. Now, threat intelligence, we keep on gathering threat intelligence. We keep on doing research. We want to be able to share this research and collaborate with others. Now, we've identified some partners for our collaboration. We want to look at CANSO. We want to look at the AFI region FIRs, airlines, and CNS equipment manufacturers. Equipment manufacturers are the ones who provide us with the technology, but we want to understand the technology we are using. We want to know how these technologies can be maybe disturbed or brought down, because once that happens, then we are out of business. So we need to really understand what is being brought to us. And then we want to have a framework for ongoing collaboration and information sharing. Now, disaster recovery. When it comes to cybersecurity, we are not just looking at being maybe malicious with the things we do, but we want to make sure that if there's a problem, even if it's man-made or not man-made, we need to make sure that we have a way to come back from it. So we want to keep on looking at disaster recovery. How can we recover from the disasters? If something happens, do we wait before it happens before we plan to find a way to come back? No. We want to have our disaster recovery in place, and we want to make sure that we know how to use our disaster recovery plans well. Now, the cybersecurity audit is going to focus on access controls and disaster recovery, like I've mentioned earlier. And then the importance of the stakeholder engagement. So enhanced threat detection and response. You see, if you do not know what is coming at you, you would not know how to protect yourself from it. So then we are saying that we want to be able to understand the threats and know how to respond to them. And this is going to be based on what? Research. Now, we want to increase compliance and regulatory adherence. Now, with that, you realize that Annex 17 subchapter 4.9 talks about measures relating to cyber threats. And we want to be able to really understand these things and how to provide for it. And then we want to build trust and confidence within the ecosystem, within our stakeholders as well. So these are some strategies for effective collaboration with our stakeholders. We want to engage in regular training and simulation exercises and establish clear communication lines. I want to be able to reach out to people who really matter when it comes to the CNS equipment and make sure that we understand the things we are doing and how to protect ourselves as well. Now, what's the rationale for establishing the SOCs? I mentioned earlier that we need to monitor what we are doing or the data within our administrative body and then the signals we are sending into the skies. What are our challenges? Training for ETSEPs, articles, and stakeholders in cybersecurity, and then CNS ATM specific cybersecurity education, research into vulnerabilities and 0 days, funding into cybersecurity research, threat intelligence sharing, and the human resource. We want to be able to develop our human resource. That's my presentation for today. Thank you. Any questions, please?
Thank you, Engineer Nana, for that. Please, we give him another clap for what he's done. Yeah, indeed, our infrastructure as ANSPs and aviation practitioners is very sensitive. And they are so self-critical that we can't afford not to protect our data. Cybersecurity is real. And for this, I think due to the fact that Ghana is within our region, these are matters that we need to look into, that we do peer review together with them. This time around, allow me, I will ask for slots for questions later on. Allow me to establish whether our colleague from Aaron, Pete, who is the Chief Information and Security Officer, who's going to take us into the next session of the workshop, is Pete around with us. Are you connected on call?
Yep, I am. Can you hear me?
Okay, welcome. We just want to establish one thing, whether how you want to present this, whether you want to allow questions as you present or at the end of the presentation.
Please ask any questions that come to mind as I present.
Okay, say again.
Please just ask questions as they come to mind. Happy to answer them as they occur.
All right. Our colleagues, as you have heard, the presenter is about to take the stage. If you have any questions, you can always raise your hand. We'll be able to interrupt him or at the end of the day, including what Nana just presented to us. This time around, I want to invite you, Pete Clay. The show is yours, and please, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and thank you so much for allowing me to present to you today. It's truly an honor. My name is Pete Clay. As mentioned, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Arion. I've spent 25 years working in cybersecurity. It is literally where all the gray hair that you can see in my beard and my hair has come from, because all of the things that Nano just talked about are very real, and they're a challenge globally. My career has included, this is my 4th time as a Chief Information Security Officer. I have been the CISO for Deloitte US, Click globally, a company called Invitas, and now for Arion. In between all those fun things, I have started and run 11 security startups, or been a security consultant, typically for very large US federal entities or global government entities, as well as very large financial institutions. I joined Arion because I am fascinated with the subject. I grew up, my dad was a member of a company called COMSAT, which did satellite communications for the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs. And so I watched man, land on the moon from a very, very small television screen about 5 inches across in Talkeetna, Alaska. And from there, we moved to Nigeria. So I've lived all over the world and lived globally and have a deep, lifelong, passionate love affair with Africa. So I'm very jealous that I'm not able to be there with you today. What we're going to talk about is going to be one of the things that is going to change everything about how we do cybersecurity. As Nano so brilliantly mentioned, cybersecurity is about protecting data and protecting systems. And when we start to talk about artificial intelligence, we very typically have put boundaries around those things and said, this is what I'm protecting, this is what you're protecting, and let's see how we can work together. With AI, those boundaries absolutely disappear. We are sharing our data today in ways that many organizations do not understand. If you are using cloud service providers to do business applications, if you are using cloud and SaaS, software as a service, if you are using outsourced data systems, you are already part of an AI revolution that's going on in computing. It is very likely, and in fact, it is probable that your data is being used today to create training models for other people's applications tomorrow. That is happening on a global basis. It is happening in ways that people do not fully understand or connect with today. And it is going to have significant unknown consequences for everybody in this room, to include the speaker. I wish I could absolutely predict what's going to happen. I was just part of a group of concerned chief information security officers that went to a global data provider, a global software as a service provider, who did a very quiet announcement about a year and a half ago that all of the data that we were sharing with them as part of the use of our tools, which we pay for, was being de-identified and used with OpenAI to build new programs around coding, around data services, etc. That changes the landscape. That changes the processes that we use to secure our data, because we build our own applications and we have very proprietary data that we have to protect. As ANSPs, it can seem like, well, all of my data is public, right? Other people can see the aircraft. Other people can see most of what we do. We're typically public entities. We share all this information anyway. But as Nano just said, and rightfully so, threat intelligence is about understanding what data is available and what data people want to take, or what data people want to manipulate. And so artificial intelligence and aviation is going to be a critical factor for everyone in the room to understand, where is my data coming from? What biases may be in the data that I'm consuming? Where is my data going to? How is my data being used by other third parties to inform and build their products? What happens if they lose control of it? Who is liable for that? And those questions are going to take years to evolve. And so this presentation, first of all, is to talk about where AI and aviation come together today, and how that makes sense and how that's starting to impact you. We'll walk through some use cases of where it's being used, and particularly for remote airfield management and things like that, that will be incredibly applicable to Africa. Number two, we'll talk about some of the regulatory things that are going on, because the other thing, and it came out of this conversation with the other CISAs for the global service provider, your laws and regulations impact what I do. The laws and regulations that I operate under impact what you do. And we have to come together and make up sensible rules so that we can get the benefits that we're going to talk about at the beginning without and mitigate a lot of the downsides to these things. So like it or not, via computers, we are about to come much closer together, and the security of my systems and the quality of the data that I have will impact the security of your systems and the quality of data that you have. I've heard in looking at this over the last 2 years, I want to be super specific about a couple of things. No one that I have talked to that is in any way responsible claims that artificial intelligence will be able to replace controllers and replace human beings in the process of controlling aircraft and flight safety. What AI and all of the major thrusts around AI is doing is it's an enhancement for those processes. Flight data analysis as Arion, and with the ability to manage global air traffic, we see everything that's flying with an ADS-B transponder 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We are starting to be able to dive very deep into that data to understand both flight hazards and start to set thresholds for things, understand the limitations of other air navigation and navigation services, etc. The understanding of that data allows risk assessments to be performed in a way that have never been possible before. We will start to see systems that tell us that things are going wrong very, very early on into the failure process that will allow us to avoid even more. It will increase safety and allow us to avoid a great many things that might have been serious or catastrophic incidents in the past. Artificial intelligence, I just went through an old simulator system that was used in the 1960s for air traffic or for aircraft. And then had the chance to sit down and go through a simulator for a modern aircraft. It is a radically different experience. And we will be able to simulate all sorts of weather conditions, weather patterns, changes in processes, reorientation of airports and air navigation environments, and we'll be able to do that pretty much on demand. If you are a fan of Microsoft Flight Simulator, it's about to get a whole lot better. In enhanced air traffic, we've already seen significant advances in air traffic management and airflow management. We are about to see even greater ones as we put more and more tools and capabilities in the hands of the humans that are on the ground managing air traffic, as well as the humans that are actually piloting the aircraft. When I started looking at these things, I heard a lot of conversation about artificial intelligence is coming. We will have years to prepare for it. It will be something that we adjust to over time. I think by 2035, 2038, we'll have good systems and processes in place to manage it. If you take away nothing else about what I talk about today, please understand this. AI in aviation isn't coming, it's absolutely here. What you see on the right-hand side of the screen is the sales value of AI solutions in the aviation market in 2024 was just over $1 billion. It's increasing by $500 million a year. That's projects, processes, etc. That is global. What we do in North America, what we do in Europe, what we do in the Middle East, what we do in Africa, these are all being sold together. And with numbers like these on the right-hand side, what you have to understand is this is not the biggest possible market for AI, but it's a big enough market that it's driving a lot of investment. If anything, these numbers are probably going to be low. So it's coming. It's already being built into the systems or being used to build the systems that we are consuming, to include several that Nano just mentioned. When I saw the list of things that he was mentioning, a lot of those systems are now starting to use AI to provide a lot of the benefits that we're talking about for cybersecurity, right? It makes my operators smarter. It makes it more capable, makes them more capable, allows them to move faster. Those are all wonderful things for me, but I have to understand where that data is coming from, and I have to understand the value of that data, and that can be a Herculean task. Two definitions, and you're going to see a couple of definitions as we go through this, right? Machine learning is the use and development of computer systems that are able to learn and adapt without following explicit instructions. TCAS has been around for any number of years. That's a machine learning tool and process. Artificial intelligence is a system able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, et cetera, et cetera. What you're going to see in the case studies that we're looking at now are much more AI focused than simple machine learning processes. But these terms and definitions are really important to understand from a cybersecurity standpoint, because how you treat the data and how you treat the interactions is very, very critical. When you're dealing with machine learning, that's one set of processes. Artificial intelligence is something that's completely different. Just because AI has just entered kind of the lexicon and the hype cycle, if you will, of different things, let's also remember that AI is over 10 years old. It is not brand new. It is not, you will go back and find references to artificial intelligence and the possibilities of it from the early 1970s. This has been a goal of computing over time. It has just become a reality of computing in the last 3 or 4 years. Well, started in 2016, and so the last 8 years. A word to know, ontology. You'll actually see this slide twice. It's a very, very important thing to understand. Because if you follow the work that Nano just described that Ghana is doing, all of these things that used to be within the boundary, maybe analytics was within the boundary, or our data sources was within the boundary that we're talking about, Nano very quickly, as well as the rest of us, are going to have to think in terms of these ontologies. Not just my data, but your data. Not just my security environment, but your security environment. Not just how am I consuming the data, but how are you consuming the data? This begins to obliterate language. It begins to obliterate culture. It begins to obliterate legal definitions and standards that are local. And so you have to start to understand how these things are put together, because what shows up on your screen to help those controllers and to help your teams control aircraft and ensure safety are going to be dependent on hundreds and thousands of unknown partners. And what they do will definitively impact what you're able to see and do and your perception of what's going on for any situation. AI is here today in all of these different environments. We understand how some of this has been put together. Some of this is AI is impacting some of this by generating the code. It is very possible that computer programming within the next 3 years will look radically different than it does today. It's changing how passengers experience both air terminals as well as as well as flying anywhere. Aircraft maintenance and predictive maintenance is changing as dramatically as any market that I've ever seen. Baggage handling and tracking has improved so much. As somebody who grew up flying globally, the last time that I lost a bag, sometimes I wish I could lose a bag. The last time I lost a bag, I can't even remember, as well as cargo and everything else. Security and risk assessments are changing dramatically. We are rapidly outstripping our ability for me to just say, I have got my SOC 2, I've got my ISO 27001 certification, my NIST 853 Rev 5, authority to operate. All of those things that we have relied on are changing dramatically today, because we are able to model and understand risks now in near real time. Airline revenue management, how organizations make money and cash flow moving through the environments, is absolutely critical to understand from a cybersecurity standpoint, because that's what people go after. Safety and risk management, these processes are really just beginning to take off. But you'll see things like safety dashboards, et cetera, that are popping up and starting to make sense to organizations, because it starts to leverage the experience and capabilities of the global ANSP community. AI impacts on aviation safety today. This is, by the way, an AI-generated picture. I am not an artist. It took me only a few minutes with a very nice AI generation system to be able to create this and make it look like I'm a great artist. The interesting part of this is everything from the towers to the control systems to the aircraft to the management of the ground systems. All of those are impacted by AI today at many, many airports. AI and ATC. One of the interesting things is I think I have gone through Heathrow Airport more than 100 times in my life, maybe more than 200. I really don't know and have lost count. If you've ever flown into the United Kingdom, the sunny days are absolutely glorious, but you need to be prepared for very, very low ceilings. It turns out that when they built the air traffic control tower, I believe it's 187 meters to provide the best view over this massive expanse of an airport. It turns out that on a number of days, the tower itself is obscured by the low clouds, so they can't see. You're not going to shut down Heathrow. So what they've done is they started using a trial within the virtual contingency center that enhances the controller's ability to see it. The program is called Amy. It interprets the images, tracks the aircraft, and informs the controller when aircraft has successfully cleared the runway. It actually enhances a controller's line of sight into more areas of the airport than they're able to do simply from the tower itself. This graphic, again, is AI generated, but what it does is it marries together literally thousands of sensors to enable the human controllers to make sense of what's going on in the environment, even when they physically cannot see it. This system is still in test. It is not operational yet, to the best of my knowledge. But as you can see, it believes that NATS believes that the system will help the airport reclaim the lost capacity and improve passenger functionality. Again, when you go through Heathrow as many times as I had, you have the Heathrow 45 minutes, which means that any transit of Heathrow will take 45 minutes longer, but the flight will probably be delayed by 45 minutes just because it's Heathrow. So thinking about this, this is a use case that really ties together resilience, continuity of operations, and safety. in a way that leverages those existing sensors and those existing processes to enable the humans to provide better control. Norway, the world's largest remote tower center, was inaugurated. It's been operating at 6 airports, and there's really been no impact on the change of procedures. What's been very interesting to do is, or what they're able to see is, they're still communicating, aircraft are still communicating via radio. A 360-degree camera at each airport actually provides more detailed images, particularly around birds and managing potential bird hazard and strikes, than a human controller was able to do just sitting there. The remote towers are managed from a central location in Bodo, so you don't have to send controllers out to these remote locations. And there's actually increased and enhanced settings for night vision and being able to view situations via infrared. With such enormous environments and enormous distances, such as Africa, it is very likely that these remote tower solutions are going to be among the first adopted things that we start to see coming up in Africa. It's worth noting that Canada is also doing a significant remote tower environment that is among one of the most impressive engineering and technical things that I think I have ever been able to or been introduced to in my career. Des Moines, Iowa. Des Moines, Iowa is a relatively busy regional airport in the United States. And so what they're able to do is to just use AI to give more up-to-date and accurate flight information, which allows both the airport operations team to manage the airport resources better, as well as allows the passengers to know when to arrive, when to get there, and what to do. And those processes are so incredibly important because if you're running late for a plane, it allows also airlines to maximize their return on investment by flying into and out of Des Moines and all of those things. So you start to see these public-private partnerships that really pop up and start to make a lot of sense. Norfolk, Virginia. Norfolk is an airport that I've flown into and out of. It's about 2.5 hours drive from my house. The challenge there is because the land, it sits right on the coast, the eastern seaboard of the United States. So there is no more land. You're not going to be able to add more runways. You're not going to be able to add more terminal space, more parking. All of those things become very challenging. They used AI in a number of different ways to optimize and automate everything about airport operations. And so everything from just where to park the aircraft, how to move aircraft on the ground, how to get passengers from their cars into the gate area and onto an aircraft as quickly as possible, has allowed Norfolk to see upwards of a 30% increase in revenues over the last 3 years. So now we understand some of the ways that AI is being used today. But let's start to talk about the cybersecurity pieces of this and what goes into it. Trust is one of the most difficult things to really define and understand from a cybersecurity standpoint. One of the most popular security strategies and architectures today is called zero trust. I don't want to have to trust you to do the right thing. You don't have to trust me to do the right thing. We agree on what the basics are and how we're going to do things. That's great when you're talking about a network that you can put a boundary around. That's great when you're talking about maybe a network you can put a boundary around and some supply chain. That's great when you can do that. But how do we do that at nation state levels? How do we do that How do you know that Arion is delivering valuable, valid data to you via the safety dashboard, via our primary core systems? How do you know that? How can you trust that? How do you know that the aircraft are providing accurate information? How do you know what's going on there? Data quality. If you've been around computers for any period of time, you understand, you've heard the term garbage in, garbage out. How we define and collect data today and how we deliver that data is absolutely critical. Your definition of it has to be the same as my definition of it for our systems to work together. Otherwise, when you've been doing this for as long as I have, you find yourself in ridiculous conversations. Well, this is what I meant by traffic. This is what you meant by traffic, but those two things don't come together. So before we do anything, we have to create a new joint definition of traffic that we can both agree to. When you work inside intensely, highly regulated systems like we all do, you don't just create a new definition of traffic. You may be talking about things that take years to perfect and years to understand and years to ensure that we have the right definitions. That doesn't mean that the regulatory issues are going to prevent us from doing it. It means that we have to understand those regulatory issues and plan for them as we start to see these systems grow. Because one of the challenges of AI today is many of the providers that we use globally are simply taking data, and you'll find buried in the 47th page of your terms and conditions, we may use all the data that you provide us in a de-identified format to do whatever we want to, essentially. I'm paraphrasing wildly. I seldom read to the 47th page of the terms and conditions, but we're going to have to start doing that to really understand what's happening to our data. Transparency. In the group of CISOs that got together to talk to that global system provider, the greatest source of anger came from the lack of transparency. And their response was not ill-considered. Their response was, well, we put out a press release, we put it in our terms and conditions, we actually put out 4 customer notices. What do you want us to do? The sense of transparency has got to be there for everyone and for everyone to think through. The sense of transparency into how these models are built has got to be open source. That terms and definition thing. How do I define a packet? How do I define these things? The international standards for how we define these things are going to become so much more important. It's also going to be absolutely critical that we understand how the algorithms take our data and manipulate them to produce the results. We're going to be going away from closed source systems very, very shortly. Because as someone who is running a certified ANSP and is the CISO for a certified ANSP, as Arion is, I have to know, I can't guess, I have to know where the value of the data that's coming in, how we use it, what's going on with it, and does it make sense and does it meet our standards? Finally, and you'll see the last thing here is technical know-how. I want to make a very, very important point about cybersecurity in general as it's practiced today. I have built 11 cybersecurity companies. I have built 4 cybersecurity consulting practices. I've done all these different wonderful things in my career. I love the technology. absolutely love the technology. But if you'll remember from Nano's presentation, there was a really important point in there. All of those projects and all of those programs use technology, but the governance of the processes was the critical function of what he was building out in 2024 and 2025. 22% of cybersecurity is based around technology. 78% of cybersecurity is based around people and process. So all of the cybersecurity engineers in the world are fantastic. I have led architects, I've led engineers, I've done all of these wonderful things and love working with the technology. But we absolutely have to get that other 78% right in the people and process, the stakeholders and the communications. We have to get those things right. If we don't, all the technology in the world isn't going to solve this for us. So technical know-how goes far beyond just the ability to use computers and manipulate data. It also goes into HR resources, human resources. It goes into legal. Legal is going to become absolutely critical. It'll become into leadership and in simple process management. Project management will become absolutely critical. If you're going to change the timelines on virtually everything that you do by having to understand how the data, where the data comes from, how it's used, how it's manipulated, all of those things are going to impact and elongate projects. And in some ways, you'll be able to use tools to shorten them. But those, quote, soft skills that we don't talk about nearly enough in cybersecurity are going to be paramount and critical for understanding how we do these things. It gets complex fast. I told you guys would see this slide again. This is from Palantir. This is the Palantir ontology. This is a system that goes in and gathers data within an organization. And then it does all of these discrete things, and you start to see it's not just this vast worldwide globe of things that are interacting. All of that's true. It's also internal to your organization. All of these things are beginning to move very, very fast and very quickly. And so your cybersecurity processes, I might have thought about this as late as 6 months ago. I'm going to build a security environment because I can do a risk assessment around my analytics environment. I'm going to secure the workflow slightly differently, so that will be a different enclave. I'll do my integrations and API as a separate environment because I'm going to manage those APIs. I've got a different risk portfolio for that. Each one of the things internally might have had a slightly different risk portfolio. I'm going to group it in a way that makes sense so that I can save a little bit of money on cybersecurity. Now my problem set is very different. I have to build something that incorporates both operational technology as well as the business applications, as well as my third-party integrations, as well as all of the trust relationships I have to build, as well as ensuring that my organization meets the international standards for the exchange of data so I don't mess up everybody else. And I have to do all this at a speed in which an engineer today can connect your entire organization to a global system in about 15 minutes. That's going to change how we do cybersecurity. It's about to get much, much, much faster. Here's the good news. Now that I've scared everybody, because this stuff is older, the mitigations are well understood. If you're willing to put in some time and put in a little bit of effort, you can start to really get good information, and we're going to talk about those things. The architectures for managing these things are very, very standard. Security processes are well defined. Testing processes, how do I test to make sure that we understand these things, are available? And risk assessment methodologies are well done and well understood. So what we're able to do today is we can leverage what we've done, but as Nano talked about, we have to put these things into process today so that by 2025, 2026, the world's only speeding up. We're able to do these things at the speed of threats, at the speed of process. So 10 years ago, I was part of an organization that built one of the very first security orchestration automation platforms. We had a great idea and we said, you know what? We could automate these things to become much smarter, much faster, much better. That's great. That's fantastic. Ran into a couple challenges, right? Bad data coming in, if you automate stupid, you only get faster stupid, right? That's not the outcome anybody's looking for. What we also saw was when you do automation, the groups that really took to automation very, very quickly were the people breaking into systems. Yesterday, there were 500,000 new pieces of malware that were released into the wild that were being used to attack your organization, my organization, global organizations. Today, there will be another 500,000. Those things, that's an example of automation that is running wild today. That function is something that you have to understand. The adversary is using automation to do these things quickly. So everything that Nano just described in the previous presentation, I absolutely understand where he's going to, and I wouldn't build it any differently. I don't think any responsible security professional would build it differently. But it's so important for him to get through those steps because he's got to do this at the speed of attackers. AI is going to take that true statement and multiply it by 1,000. The reference architectures for securing AI requires multiple layers of different security components, such as data encryption, secure data storage, all of these different things. Threat detection is going to be absolutely critical. We've got to be able to do threat intelligence at a scale that we've never been able to do it before. What we do at Arion is we actually use threat intelligence to see what people are looking at for us. One of the things as a member of CANSO is we publish as a member or as the vice chair of the cybersecurity working group. We publish monthly. We look at all air navigation service providers globally, just from the outside. We go into dark web forums, we go into all sorts of different things, and we publish a report, and it says, for all CANSO members, we see typically about 8,200 compromised machines where their data is being sold on the dark web. We see typically around 11,000 security or user IDs and passwords from these ANSPs that are being sold on the dark web for people to be able to access as these environments. We're able to see all of this information. We're not pen testing anybody's system. We're not breaking into anything. We're just looking at where the information is bought and sold, and we're able to identify it by basically the domain information. Being able to leverage that, so part of what we're trying to do to help people like Nano is we've built a Slack channel that if you want to understand how your information is involved in all of that stuff, there are some better, some worse, but all of us are in there. then we'll be able to break that information out and give that to you as a member of CANSO. All of this requires multiple organizations working together with advanced capabilities. It does me no good to have a capability like our threat intelligence system and not share the benefits of that with NANO and with the other CANSO members. That would be the same as allowing aircraft to not fly under the ICAO rules. You simply, okay, I'm going to enter here. Hey, I'm crossing your border. I'm going to do whatever I want. Doesn't really matter. You'd have total chaos. The focus here that is so important and so critical is we have to work together. And we have to be able to exchange that data in near real time. So one of the things the CANSO working group will be doing over the next year is really being able to provide that information in a self-service process that really makes sense to everybody. So you'll be able to go in and get your own information whenever you want it, feed it into your systems, and be able to leverage that on an ongoing basis. AI reference architecture. This is not for the faint of heart. You have to really start to dive into these things and understand this, because you see that magic green dot at the very edge, public APIs, third-party APIs, external data sources, edge services. That's where the magic happens, along with the algorithms themselves. You have to tightly manage requirements to outputs to make sure that you're doing this well. Remember, this is almost misleading in some ways, because your cloud network is probably consuming the data that you store there to build their AI and LLM models. The application logic that you may be consuming may be moving it somewhere else. As we have deconstructed computer systems into these large global fabrics, your information, my information, everyone's information, whether it's being sent, whether we think it's being sent via point-to-point telco, et cetera, is all going to be out there and shareable in some way, shape, or form. What your organizations do with Arion, if you purchase Arion, that's great. Thank you very much. But what your organizations do, the security of the Arion system is dependent upon you as well. You're not just dependent on us, it is bilateral. And it's because of these architectures that that's a true statement. This is one of the things that MITRE has come up with that is very, very important to understand. Because your organizations are going to start to have to think about AI in a way that you have to understand how these attacks happen and what's going on. This is put out by MITRE and by Microsoft. And when you start to walk through these, you're going to find that it's a very different process to think about than maybe the standard MITRE attack and defend matrix. Understanding the model ontology, understanding the algorithmic processes, having the trust with your vendors and having the trust with your supply, the people you supply things to, is going to be critical, because when you start to look at the data requirements in here, it's sharing very sensitive data. And there's going to have to be trust, and there's going to have to be things that we may not have today. As is so often, the EU Artificial Intelligence Act is a very, very important thing to understand, because I cannot make the statement more or greater than saying this right now. What the EU does from a legal standpoint, and we're about to walk through that, is going to impact everyone in this room, to include us. Not just because we're certified by the EU, but because we have to understand that as we consume and generate AI, it's going to be subject to any European entity that uses this. We are now working as a global community, whether we want to or not. The innovations from the EU processes are designed to increase trust. And we start to have common language, common standards, common processes that we can start to talk about this. We start to harmonize those processes as we go through all of these things for ourselves. The creation of regulatory sandboxes, can we test things? That's where that knowledge is going to come from. Was this tested here? What are the standards that it was tested to? Did it pass those standards? Public-private partnership is something that works better in some areas of the world and worse in others, but it's going to impact us all. It's going to be absolutely critical that we understand, for example, Google, the most highly, I've made this is cybersecurity humor, so it's not funny to anyone who's not in cybersecurity. I think the most closely guarded secret in the world has nothing to do with nuclear weapons or military secrets or anything else. It's the original formula of Coca-Cola. Of all of the cybersecurity programs I've ever seen, the formula for Coca-Cola beats all the security for all of those other things, which says so much about us in so many different ways. But we are fundamentally going to, if we're going to generate trust, we're going to have to believe that we're going to have to know at least some parts of the formula for Coca-Cola to make all of this work together. Digital innovation, having been a member of 11 startups, trust me when I say that your first year in a startup, regulatory issues are not the top 10 things that you're thinking about. Can I build it fast enough? Where can I get the resources? Where can I get the customers? How do I do that? How do I meet their needs and what's going on? Those are the things you're thinking about. Thinking about the EU regulatory environment around AI, there are over 100,000 funded AI initiatives that are in the world today. None of them right now are thinking about the EU regulatory framework. So there's going to have to be environments where they can go in and go through a process that does not decrease trust, so they have to meet the standards. And so these innovation hubs and testing and experimentation facilities are going to be critical for organizations to take the next steps. I'm not going to read all of these things to you, but I would strongly encourage you, this is the definition of AI that we are adopting as part of our cybersecurity program at Arion. Yes, we are a US-based company. Yes, I understand NIST has a slightly different version of this. Yes, I understand different states do different things. The federal government's going to do different things. Our customers are going to do different things. This is the best definition that I have seen. This is where our program will start, and this is where our program will work from. Classification of AIs. This is something that has caused a tremendous amount of discussion and argument. Prohibited AIs. Again, remember, culturally, I am so grateful to have grown up overseas and to have grown up in Africa and Europe and all of those different places and all of those wonderful things. That's all fantastic. That is a wonderful way to grow up and live your life. What works in your country may not work in the United States, and in the United States may not work in your country. Our cultures are something that we also have to manage. So what's prohibited in Europe may not be prohibited in your country. What's prohibited in Europe is certainly not prohibited in the United States. So these definitions of prohibited, high risk, and minimal risk are out there, and they're important to understand, but you may have to work, again, this goes back to the trust issue, you may have to work with some of these definitions to think about what is culturally permissible and allowable in your environments. These are put here to give you what that Europe is saying, but you will have to think them through in your own ways. Prohibited AI practices. There are systems today that violate, there are systems in operation today that violate virtually all of these standards and processes. I'll give you a second to look through them and just think about how they would impact your organization and your country at the moment. Remember, as this information is gathered, as you gather information, you may not fall into any of these particular categories in how you use the information. How someone else can use the information may very much fall into these categories. And so going back to those trust conversations, it's absolutely critical to think about not just how you intend to use information and how you intend to use and share information internal to your organization, how someone else could use or misuse the information will be absolutely fundamental to what you're trying to do.
Pete, are you there?
Yep.
Yeah, we interrupt you. Apologies for that. We want to leave the remaining 7 or 6 minutes from now, before 10:30, for break, just to allow a few questions from the participants here, so that after that at 10:30 we go for break and then we continue at 11.
Okay.
Yes, please. Do we have any question, clarification that you need to seek from Pete the next 5 minutes or so? AI and cybersecurity. Any feedback? Or we are all clear, or it is confusing, whichever.
It's one or the other.
All right. I think from the layman point of view, or those who are so curious about the cyber and AI, the question, of course, Pete, would be, what comes first, AI or cyber, and do they comprehend each other? To what extent does AI help in mitigating cybersecurity? Maybe those are issues that we need to understand, whether you can run cybersecurity without AI, or you can run AI without cybersecurity, just from my perspective.
So
can you explain, yeah.
If you follow the processes that Nano laid out, and that's how you build your program, and you extend them, you can have very, very successful AI programs. If you don't build your foundation that way, you will have wildly unsuccessful AI programs. Cybersecurity has to be a foundational thing that you're able to build your program on top of to both share and receive information. Now, the challenge that Nano is going to find, and probably already it does find, is how do I do it fast enough? Because the true statement in cybersecurity is, I have run programs where my budget was greater than $100 million a year. I had 400 people that worked with me on 4 different continents. We worked around the clock, and we worked very, very hard all all the time. I didn't have enough resources and I didn't have enough people. I've also run programs where my budget was $2 million and I had 2.5 people that worked with me, and I didn't have enough time, I didn't have enough people, and I didn't have enough resources. So prioritization is absolutely critical. And being able to understand and build these things out and do them at speed means to do these things, I'm not going to be able to do these things. And so that's what makes the profession very hard. And AI can help with that. AI can make my SOC operators smarter and able to do more. But I have to be very aware of what information I'm giving away about Arion, or about our environment, or about our customers' environments, by extension, to be able to do that. And so it becomes a process that is a series of trade-offs. And that's why on Nano's slide, it was so interesting to see building out the stakeholder conversations, because as a CISO, my organization relies on me to be able to be the advisor, to understand the risks and to be able to advise them on the risk. When it comes to incident response, I'm the driving force for incident response. But the executives, I have to have the stakeholder buy-in from the executives to be able to communicate with them so that they can make decisions about the organization. And so when you go back and you look and you see what Nano is pulling together for Ghana, I would argue that right up there with all the red team, blue team, purple teaming, and building SOCs and doing this and doing these things, those are all critical things. They're all foundational. But having the stakeholder conversation is the most important thing. Did that answer the question?
Yeah. Somehow answered the question. I think people are appreciating this. Thank you very much, Pete. For now, I would love to say, please, get a bottle of water just for now, so that at 11 o'clock, yeah, we'll come and complete and finish the workshop. A round of applause for Pete so far. Thank you. I expect everyone to be seated by 11 so that Pete can continue with the remaining slides. Thank you very much. Enjoy your tea. We want to continue with our program. We have about 45 minutes in which Pete is supposed to summarize, and for the remaining 5 minutes before 12, we can allow it for questions and clarifications. Without wasting much of our time, I'll ask and invite Pete to please continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and my apologies. While you all were having a wonderful tea, I'm sure I got to chase two very large dogs through basically a swamp, and so I am soaking wet and very, very dirty. So thank you for bearing with me. As we were speaking about before we left, we have the EU has defined these as prohibited AI practices. And it's very important to understand them and start to think about them, because as you are consuming software as a service and globally available information, or sharing your information to them, understand how other countries are going to be looking at the information and interpreting it. It is absolutely critical, particularly since airports have such a key role in border security, in managing just the safety of air travel itself, and in thinking about some of these. Your laws and the laws of the people consuming the data may not be the same. And so in thinking about these particular slides, it's important to think about how you're collecting data, where that data is shared, and what those processes look like. Because again, data no longer stays local, it definitely goes global. High-risk systems are really considered safety components of products that are covered by EU legislation. The AI system itself is covered by EU law. And so understand these are very, very new. These have all come into being and are going into force kind of as we speak. And so the challenges here, and you will start to see this with things around your business systems, things like Microsoft Office. And if you use Microsoft Azure, AWS, if you use a lot of the online systems, Microsoft Sentinel, Splunk, and things like that, from a cybersecurity standpoint, those are all going to have to undergo third-party conformity assessments over the next year. So in thinking about that, and because cybersecurity systems often fall under the safety and fundamental rights, because the EU laws are very, very strict on this, there are going to have to be some adjustments that may be made. So it is critical, as you're consuming these systems to support your cybersecurity function, that you're able to understand why these changes are being made and what changes over there may impact your organization or your function in Africa. High-risk systems, and want to be very specific about this. So using them for simulation systems may be permissible, and you're going to get into a lot of different gradients around these things that you're going to have the conversation with either your international partners via ICAO or via CANSO. These conversations, while they seem abstract, are going to impact how you manage your border relationships, how you manage the video that you take inside the airports, how you manage your CCTV processes, et cetera, who you share your border crossing information with, and what does that mean? The other problem or possibility here, depending upon which side of the law that you're on and which part of the monetary systems that you're on, is high-risk AI systems can also be used for detecting financial fraud. So from a cybersecurity standpoint, most countries have their own laws and requirements around financial management and what is permissible and what is not permissible, how much information or how much money you can move into what accounts. And so AI systems are becoming very adept and are being very much used for detecting fraud, waste, and abuse in the use of those funds. And it is critical that you understand this as it relates to both your country's funding processes as well as the airport or the airline's funding processes as well. So we are moving in some ways much more to a process where those things that are ultra-national, that cross many borders in many nations, are going to have to be managed very locally. And while this may be good or bad, depending upon your particular situation, it's really important that you're aware of it, both in how your data is being used, as well as how you're consuming and using other people's data. Particularly important is anything to do with people. HR AIS providers, human resource AIS providers must understand some things. There's a very famous use case in the United States where a very large company decided it was going to build an artificial intelligence system to attract and manage its human resource talent. They spent almost 5 years building the system, building the algorithmic model, and they wanted to do a very broad-based diversity process to make sure that they were getting the best candidates, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of all sorts of other factors. And what they found was the output of the algorithm, the output of the HR system that they spent tens of millions of dollars building, essentially reflected the biases of the people that had built it and produced only this kind of candidate, and did not support the diversity of it. So whenever you start thinking in terms of people moving through an airport, people moving onto aircraft, people moving across borders, the hiring practices local to the airport, the hiring practice of the pilots and the airlines for national air carriers, all of those things are going to have to be well thought through to reflect not just the local cultural processes, but to make sure that any of those additional systems that you use from outside that were built in Europe or built in North America are appropriate for your local market as well. That's going to require you to talk to them about what they produce and what those things produce in terms of, do they produce only white males in terms of suitable candidates? How do they implement diversity? What are those processes? How do they deal with language differences? What's going into all of that in assessing a candidate? It gets very, very sensitive when you start sharing biometric information, and particularly with the fights against terrorism and everything else, and understanding that one country's label of terrorist doesn't apply to everybody in the world. How do you share biometric information? How do you share passport information and border crossing information? All of those things are going to be very, very critical. And as of right now, they are completely unformed. And so that's going to put the requirements back on the local organizations to really understand this and make sure that you're at least compliant with your local laws, regulations, and standards. But as you buy things like Office 365 or use Google Office or use any of those sorts of tools and things, you have to understand the limitations and the processes there. And the question can't just be, how much does this cost? The question also has to be, what are you doing with my data? Where is it going? Where is it stored? How is it managed? Who else has access to it? The minimum standard for everyone is to make sure that logs are maintained of who is accessing your data. Understanding that if something goes wrong, how do you get notified? What are the corrective actions that are likely? And what are the scenarios for incident response? Back to Nano's presentation. Cooperation with national competent authorities means your stakeholders have to be involved. They have to know what's going on. This isn't just a legal question or an organizational executive question. This is a cybersecurity legal question, human resource question, executive question, national law question, and all of those things have to be brought together. There has to be trust in the reporting system. It used to be, at least in the US, people in my position, a chief information security officer, lasted in their job typically 2 to 2.5 years. The reason for that was when something went wrong, CISOs got fired because it went wrong. So what did that do? That meant that issues didn't get reported because people didn't want to lose their job. It is so critical to follow Nano's blueprint that he laid out in engaging with stakeholders and understanding the likelihood of everyone that's hearing this right now, that everyone that's speaking right now, the odds are 100% in the next 3 years, you will have a significant cybersecurity event. It is 100%. And what you do and how you manage that event is totally up to you. Speaking as someone who is a chief information security officer, I can tell you that firing your chief information security officer may be warranted, may be necessary, but probably not the best idea to fire them in the middle of the incident. So how you prepare for these things and how you build those trust relationships at the very beginning is a critical function of what you're trying to do. Because reporting, I don't enjoy calling my boss at 3 o'clock in the morning and telling them that something has gone wrong. I don't know how many of you were impacted by the recent issue with CrowdStrike, but we started getting issues and notifications about 11 o'clock at night that we were losing endpoint machines that were still up and operating. Our SOC saw that and started reporting that. Simultaneously with that, we started getting alerts that were coming in telling us that Microsoft Azure, which we don't use to deliver our core system, but we do use for business operations, was unstable and was going up and down. At midnight, I had to make a call to my boss, who is a fantastic human being, but really, like most of us, doesn't like being woken up at midnight to be told, hey, we're losing parts of our system and we're figuring it out, but I just wanted to keep you informed. He had to go talk to the CEO who wanted more information. The CEO, we had to start waking up board members because that's our process. We want that free flow of information. So by the time we understood what was going on with CrowdStrike and what was going on with Microsoft Azure, it was about 6 o'clock the next morning. We'd had 3 different phone calls to make sure everybody was up to speed and everybody understood what the impacts were. By the next day, we had everything back under control and everything was fixed, up and operating by 10 a.m. the next morning. That was fantastic. Great. Well done to the team. But now we have to do the after action review. The point that I'm saying about all of this is we had followed what Nano just laid out earlier today. That's our process as well. That allowed us to manage the process, to keep the stakeholders informed, and to make sure that everybody was aware of what was going on. We were also talking live to CrowdStrike and to Microsoft and to some law enforcement to make sure that there was no attack going on, and to some other functions. And so at one point, I literally had 3 phone calls going simultaneously. The point of all of this is just to simply give an example of, within the last 2 months, we had a significant cybersecurity event that was primarily caused by a third party pushing the wrong update onto our computers. When you start talking about AI, without that transparency and without the stakeholder buy-in from both your executive team, as well as your vendors, as well as your internal team, and being able to manage all of that on an ongoing basis in the middle of the night, you're going to have challenges. Finally, we're going to see new conformity assessments and new processes that have to come into place for us to be able to trust these AI environments. That is a critical next step that the regulatory bodies are currently working with, but we are 2 to 3 years away from that. And so the minute you see, or your team see, somebody using the term AI, it is so important that you start to ask them the questions I'm going to give you at the end of the presentation. The questions are there for you to get the basic information that you need so that you understand how to manage those incidents like the one I just described, without everything falling apart. It is critical that the teams and the companies, these questions here, you're not part of the European Union. These questions here are really to allow you to start to think about and ask those questions if you're consuming Salesforce.com, if you are consuming any of those large HR systems to source candidates, to manage your human resource information. Do you have these things? Are you required to tell me when you have a significant incident? Do you have this level of documentation? Where are the warning labels for you to say, data providers, the data you provide may be subject to the risk of high risk AI? All of those things are critical for you to be able to understand and ask, because to not have them, particularly when it comes to people, is going to start to pose legal challenges for you, maybe not in your country, but maybe in other countries. It is so important. You saw earlier in the slides that I had generated using AI that I put a label on them to say generated by AI. This is not real. This is a made-up slide that is clearly generated by AI. Being able to label data, whether it's you're talking to a chatbot, if you're using that to maybe manage passenger information systems, if you're pushing information out via automated systems, label it and tell people up front that they're talking to artificial intelligence. There was a study that came out in the United States yesterday, since we're in the middle of a political season, an election for president and for a third of the Senate and all of the House of Representatives. This is an important election for everyone. The study that came out from a very well-respected source yesterday said that almost 40% of all of the political news that people are consuming to make decisions about this important election is AI generated. It's not real. It's not true. It's designed for the user. When you get into that level of artificial data, think about what it can do to your systems if suddenly someone is able to get into your system and rearrange aircraft track, or remove an aircraft track, or change data around an aircraft. It is fundamentally critical that we understand how our systems are interacting with AI and how AI is generating that information. But the first step of that is to clearly label the data that is AI generated, so everybody understands what's happening. The transparency obligation for anything that you are purchasing, that is software as a service, you now have to go in and read the documentation. I am the greatest violator of this process ever. I believe that all systems should be simple enough for me to simply go in and start typing, and it will do exactly what I want it to every time. And if I have a question, I may look something up on Google and go. We don't do that anymore. After the experience we had with our software as a service provider using our data to train their AI, we have started going through with lawyers and with legal folks to make sure that we understand what our rights and obligations are and what everybody else's rights and obligations are. And the bottom list there: perform model evaluations, assess and mitigate risks. Do they have to report serious incidents, and what's the definition of a serious incident? What sort of testing does the AI model go through? What cybersecurity standards do they use and how are they applied? And provide information on the end user consumption of their models. Those are basic questions that you have to understand as you start to connect. This statement right here is going to be one that we look for everything that does business in the EU. We want a statement that they are compliant with all relevant EU laws. They allow a combination of existing procedures to avoid duplication and ease the compliance workload. And regulators will be designated and allowed to investigate on demand. And without using these three things right here, we are choosing not to do business with certain organizations and with certain providers that cannot meet these standards. These are the penalties in the EU. You can see some of the eye-popping penalties. Around 7% of the world turnover of Microsoft or Apple or Google is a tremendous amount of money. The fines always end up being less, but there is a significant financial penalty for doing this, which in our world we believe protects us, helps protect you, and helps protect everybody else. These are the AI bodies that are out there, particularly if you're someone like me or like Nano or someone that works in cybersecurity. These are things I have bookmarked to go in and make sure I understand what they're sharing, what's going on, and what the national competent authorities are saying, and what the findings are, and who's being investigated, and looking at these things. And then bringing that information back. Just think of this as an ongoing threat intelligence function. Bring that information back. Do we use this vendor? They're being investigated here, and asking those questions. Without the trust and without the transparency, you're not going to be able to ask the questions. You've got to be able to ask these questions. This is the implementation process. You'll see it started in second quarter, third quarter 2024. You can start to see just how it all flows out. So the time to pay attention to these things is now. Start to look at your cloud providers. Start to look at your software as a service providers. Start to look at your third-party providers and ask them questions. Are they going to meet these standards? What is their plan for meeting the standards? Start the conversation now. Because if you get to 24 to 36 months out and they say, no, we've decided we're just not going to do business in the EU, we're only going to do business somewhere else, it tells you two things. Number one, it tells you now you have to replace the EU as a regulatory body, which means you have to go into a lot of due diligence for yourself, or you have to accept the risk of doing business with that organization. Sandboxes and real-world testing. AI it's not brand new. The architectures are well understood from a cybersecurity standpoint. We understand how to manage it, how to process it, and what to do with it. But everything requires real-world testing. Does it work? Any organization that takes on an AI model without doing live system testing with your system is asking for catastrophic failure. I understand the pressure and sensitivity, as Nano mentioned earlier, that doing a penetration test on a live system can be hair-raising because systems can fail over just from the penetration test. Not because the penetration test was wrong, but some of the systems in aviation were never created to connect to the internet, never created to be penetration tested, never created to have that level of IB&B done. And they were implemented 35, 40, 50 years ago. You have to do real world testing to make this valid and make this useful for your organization. Startups. One of the most exciting things about working with Africa right now is the startup community in a number of different hubs. One of the things that the people in this room can do to think about, I love startups. I have done 11. I'm sitting on the board of 3 right now. Very, very exciting. Right now, I sit on the board of something called the cybersecurity, the global cybersecurity competition teams, national teams and regional teams. Africa certainly sends one, compete globally against other cybersecurity teams in basically penetration testing combinations. What these 17, 18, 19-year-olds are able to do with a computer is both simultaneously frightening and awe-inspiring. It is incredible. Take this information and start to think about supporting your startup communities, your startups. How can they have regulatory sandboxes? How could they get simple technical documentation so that when they come out and they sell to Africa and they're dominating the African market and they want to move to the Middle East and to Europe, start to think about these things, because there's so much that as an ANSP you can do to help them and bring both the not just the revenue, but bring the knowledge and the brains back into your local communities. And so as you're setting up an AI test bed, think about working with your local startup community to allow them maybe some access to it, to also start for them to develop these processes. Because building that community will pay dividends far, far beyond whatever the nominal costs are to let them have a couple hours of lab time. Our best source of recruiting fantastic cybersecurity people come from the penetration testing games that we support and process. I'm able to meet penetration testers and very, very skilled cybersecurity professionals at 17 or 18 years old and support them through college with internships and learning opportunities, and then make sure that I use my network of people to help them get jobs, come to work with me, go to work in the right environments for them. And that makes so much sense for the community, and it gets the best possible people out there. We're going to cut really to the end of this and really talk about the questions to ask about AI-based products. We have about 3 minutes to go. I'm not going to go through each one of these questions specifically. You will get a copy of the deck. But this is the question, these are the questions that I am asking our providers about AI. Please describe the secure design concepts that apply to your AI models. How to use, sanitize, and validate inputs and outputs. How do you set limits on the number of steps, right? Where's the human in the loop? Are you making automated decisions based upon data? What are those automated decisions? Being able to ask these things and understand these things, we get companies that will simply refuse to answer. And then we get to make a risk-based decision on, is this a company that we want to work with? Who are their vendors? What encryption do you use and where is it employed? Remember, encryption isn't just used to make your data confidential, to hide it from somebody that you don't want it to see. Encryption is also used to authenticate machines across network. It's also used to make sure that data integrity is there. And so being able to really understand that and start to push those things, you have to understand that. The question, if they will not answer it, is what access controls have you deployed? If I'm going to share data with you and you want to have Arion's data, you have to tell me exactly who has access to that data and in what forms. And if you cannot, we will not do business with you. How do you keep your systems up to date? If I'm going to share my organization's data with you, with a third party, with a vendor, and they're going to use it to build their next generation of AI, please tell me how you're going to protect my data and be specific. And I'm going to ask questions. That makes our vendor onboarding a much longer process than it used to be, because we used to just say, do you have a SOC 2? Yes, we have a SOC 2. That's an auditor's report. Thank you very much. We will accept the SOC 2. We look at it. We're done. Now we go through this process, and these are the questions that we ask. I'm about a minute over time to allow any questions. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I am sorry that my dogs were ill-behaved and cost us 10 minutes, but I really do appreciate all of your attention and listening to me. One thing for any of the cybersecurity professionals in the room, we have started a Slack channel that you can join as a member of CANSO. You can get threat intelligence there. You can ask questions there. You can, from people that have either done it or are doing it, you can get information like this there. You can also get our threat intelligence functions there as well. It is available to you as a CANSO benefit and costs you nothing to join. You can simply ask questions and take the information, or you can join in the conversations. Please reach out to me if you're interested. My email address, and would love to hear from you. I'll take any questions now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pete, and we appreciate your time, your sharing, your presentation. So informative. We hope this will help us in our processes of implementing AI and cybersecurity. Members present here, Pete took about 2 hours to present this. Is ready for us. Do we have any questions, clarification that we may want to seek from Pete? Of course, going forward, you will share the emails and the contact details for those who want a detailed information about AI and cybersecurity. Am I seeing any hand clarification? Okay, I see. Please go ahead.
Yes, I would like to know if it is possible to get the materials that you presented here.
Yes.
Sure. We have the register here, and the material should be able to be shared to everyone. Let's ensure that everyone has registered their names and the correct emails. Thank you. Do we have any question, clarification? Or maybe Pete, okay, RD.
Thank you. Zeph, just to clarify, the information will be available to the members registered,
Okay.
but it is available via the CANSO website.
Thank you.
So you will be notified when that, and it's not just this presentation,
And
it will
everything.
include all the presentations from the conference. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
And if you have a problem, your focal point will be able to help you if you have a problem to log on or something like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's clear. The website for the council members will be able to post these presentations as the case has been before. Maybe Pete, to talk about the AI bodies, which you mentioned. I saw more talking about European bodies. Do you have a global body that encompasses everyone else, or they are all aligned to Europe? I thought maybe you can make clarification on that one.
So Europe is the first, let's call it regional group to start making rules and requirements around AI. There are over 400 laws locally that we have been tracking to understand, because Arion operates globally. So we have to understand what's going on and what the requirements are that we have to meet for our customers as well. We only use the EU standards because, again, remember, we no longer, in the United States, we have loved to say we make our own laws, it's our own regulations and everything else. All the systems that we use are also pretty much present in the EU. And if they have to comply there, we're just giving these as a set of standards that you can start to count on for vendors and applications to have to meet. Not that they should replace what your local countries do in terms of AI or standards that you may want to set for your local organizations. This just gives you a starting point to answer the questions or ask the questions, not the last or final point. Does that make sense?
Well, makes sense. So I think you've left us with questions, so we just need to go through them and see how best you can understand them better. Otherwise, would like to thank the participants for today. Today's workshop was successful. And Pete, thank you so much for your time and for your presentation. We hope this will go a long way in helping NSP and CANSO members.
I think we have 2 questions. I just saw these in chat. Are some jobs going to disappear with AI in aviation? New ones be created? David, absolutely yes. This is moving very, very rapidly. Currently, the AI jobs that are the jobs that are most likely to be replaced from a cybersecurity standpoint are probably on the vendor side. Simply because if you are writing code, right? I have never mastered the art of writing computer programming. I've never done that. I'm now able to use AI to go in and write pretty extensive computer programs by using real language prompts. So I don't have to go to school now for 4 years to become a quasi-effective computer programmer. Now, my friends that are programmers tell me how badly my computer programs don't work and they're terrible and they're horrible, but I can get that done. That's an example. On the cybersecurity side, going back to the very, very beginning of the statement, all of AI that I've been able to find and look at in aviation is actually being created to enhance the ability of the controllers and enhance the ability of the humans in the decision-making loop to make good decisions, not so much to replace them. There are some studies ongoing to set some metrics in aviation, but these programs are moving incredibly rapidly. If you go back to see the amount of money that's being made right now off AI in aviation, you'll see it's increasing by 25 to 30% year over year. So the standard and the processes that were there last year that we ran the study on are going to be out of date by the time the study comes out, right? And so that's why it is so important for organizations to spend the time to get this right for themselves and to make sure that they understand the risks. Because while we can all talk about, well, we use, AI to increase maintenance and to really understand windows of failure and things like that, that information may be a year old and the market may have moved on to the next generation of that tool. And so there are still questions to ask. So David, I hope I answered your questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope I'm able to join you next year in person again.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Another round of applause for Pete. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Sure. I would like to call upon the RD now to take the center stage as I hand over. You increase, sir, I decrease. Thank you.
Pete, if you're still there, thank you very much. Colleagues, I understand it would have been great if Pete was with us here in person, but we tried our best with the constraints of technology, but also the fact that he had to wake up very early because he's in the US somewhere. Thank you for your attention. Thank you to Zeph for moderating. And thank you to Nana Abam also for the presentation from Ghana earlier this morning. We are wrapping up. We are now done with the workshop sessions. Our leaders did the close of yesterday for the conference. But allow me to just say a few things as we wrap up. Firstly, I just want to thank each and every one of you, especially those who took the long journey coming from different parts of the continent or even Europe, outside the continent, maybe even the US. We certainly appreciate this. We don't take it for granted. We certainly know the effort that goes into not just the traveling, but getting the approvals and obviously the personal impact of yours, leaving your families behind. Just also We thank the leaders that allowed us to get here. We know that there's always competition for resources, but we thank everyone for the decisions that have been made. I just want to thank the speakers, the panel members, the preparations that have been done to get us here. I know that these things don't just happen. People take a few hours of their time, sometimes late at night, to prepare for this. And I also just want to thank the organizing teams, both from CANSO events team, Ms. Shime sitting there in the corner there, and the other organizing team, Margaret and the team sitting right here. Thank you. Sometimes it can be tough. Sometimes I know I make those calls late at night and say I want some things yesterday, but you know, it's all done in good spirit. I also just want to thank the CANSO specialist teams that came here to support us, to moderate the panels, and you know, Michelle, John, Nikki. If I've forgotten anyone, I apologize. Okay. And then yeah, and then you know, sometimes getting this thing together, it takes a while. So for the last 2 months, we've lived, we've looked at this, we've looked at the program, we've made adjustments. We started with plan A, maybe with a plan B at the back of our pockets. Sometimes we ended up with plan E or plan F, but in the end, it still works. So there is a lot of effort that goes into these things. But I want to say thank you to my Deputy Regional Director. Where is she? Connie. Just want to say thank you to Connie for the support and all the hard work. I think it doesn't go unnoticed. Thank you. Having said that, before I lose my voice, maybe I should stop here. As you all know, this was obviously a joint event with AZA. So I want to call Wando from AZA to say a few words on behalf of the host, and then we will close. I'll come back once Wando is finished just to do some housekeeping rules, and then we'll close. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon. As we conclude this remarkable CANSO Africa 2024, it's my great honor to speak on behalf of AZA and to extend our heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you participating and contributing to this great event in these past few days. This year's theme was focused on implementation, and it really resonated through our discussions and our sessions. We've explored innovative solutions, we shared best practices, and more importantly, we forged stronger collaboration that will drive in the future for air traffic management with focus on a more security and more greener skies. And all
the effort that's been put here in place will matter. We just had today the cybersecurity and artificial intelligence workshop. It is a really exciting theme nowadays. This section, we could see that it provided us with critical insights and in the evolving landscape on cybersecurity threats, and also transformative potential of the AI that can enhance, for sure, our security framework, but all the risk has to be taken in care. We learn also about the need for continuous vigilance and strategy adaptation in our industry. We have to be following the tendencies. We need to be always updating. This learning, they may be considered as pivotal to protect our air traffic management system, since threats are emerging every day. So these are really some important notes to keep in mind, the importance of AI. Moreover, and we can say that this conference has underscored the importance of country-to-country collaboration. By working together, we can harness diverse expertise and resource to tackle the complex challenge we face. This collaborative approach can be considered essential and crucial for driving innovation, enhancing safety, and ensuring sustainability of our ATM system, ATS systems. But more important is that our journey does not end here. After these wonderful 4 days in our beautiful country and beautiful island that is Sal. The insights and strategy we developed together are just the beginning, and it's now up to us, not us because we are staying here from ASA, but it's now up to us as a group, as we go back to our country, to take these ideas back to our leaders and to our respective organizations and turn them into actionable plans, as I say again, to enhance safety in our skies. I would like to thank all our speakers and panelists for their thought-provoking presentation, and our sponsor for their generous support. A special thanks to CANSO team for their exceptional organization for this event, and also to ASA team for their perseverance that make this possible. As we leave Sal, let's carry forward the spirit of collaboration and innovation spirit that has really defined this conference. Together we can achieve the ambitious goal we've set and make lasting impact on aviation. We can make Africa to be a voice that will be heard. Now, I won't long too much. Let's gather for lunch and prepare ourselves for our tour today afternoon in our beautiful island. On behalf of ASA, I say again, thank you. Thank you, CANSO. Thank you, sponsors. Thank you, attendees. And to everyone involved, direct or in an indirect way, that made this event possible. Safe travels, and I look forward to see you soon in our next meeting. Thank you.
Well, it's thank you. Actually, Margaret did correct me. Vando, not Wando. Pando. Thank you, sir. We really appreciate that. Okay, just housekeeping, and then we're ready for lunch. One, there's a survey that we really request you to fill out. Here is the QR code. We can always make improvements. We can always learn from you. So please help us with that. Next, I'd like to thank the sponsors. I always repeat this because I think it's true, very true. You know, Simon always says this, that without you sponsors, you know, what we do wouldn't be possible. So we really thank you for all the support. And there will be next time, as you know, but thank you. And then thank you also to the exhibitors, which are set up in the corner there. Thank you very much. We will take a lunch break. We are actually running a little early, but that's good. We'll take a lunch break as per normal. The host tour, we will start at 14:15. So if we work that backwards, then around 1 p.m. for those who are staying in the other nominated hotels, there will be transport. So have your lunch, and then there will be transport to take you to your hotels between 1300 and 1330. At 14:15, there will be transport to pick you up from your individual hotels to then start the host tour. The recommendation regarding the dress code is that you wear something comfortable, probably shorts if you can. We might have to get into the water, which is around knee high or just below the knee. But just be comfortable. It's warm outside. The weather is good. And let's enjoy our afternoon in Sal. I see also it's still just a good idea to keep your badge, because after the tour, we're going to end up somewhere for a barbecue, and it's easy to make sure we know who's part of the group. So I think those are the only announcements I was due to make. The last one, but not least, to thank our lunch sponsor, Metron Aviation, and as we go to enjoy the lunch. So thank you. Goodbye, even though I'm still gonna see you for the afternoon. Obrigado, and we'll see you in Maputo next year. Thank you very much.